information. So now we've finished the Edo period in Japan. It was a closed society. Foreigners were not allowed to come into Japan, and they were, Japanese people were not allowed to leave. And then finally during the Meiji period, the restoration period, that was about a year long, and they were finally allowing other people to come in. So they opened the borders at that time. But right now we're missing in between 1968 to 1994, or 1945. So that from 1868 to about 1916 is the Meiji period. Then from 1916 to 1989 is the Showa period. So both we'll be talking about during the presentations tonight. The first period was after World War II. So of course, World War II, Japan and America were enemies at that time. And Japan was really trying to attack America. They wanted to take over land. They attacked at Pearl Harbor. So they were very aggressive in trying to attain more land. And that's how America was became involved in World War II. And then eventually we bombed Tokyo for a whole year. In 1945, we just kept dropping bombs all year long. But the Japanese were very stubborn and they would not give up. They wanted to keep fighting. So President Truman at that time decided, you know what he decided to do? Yes, he dropped the 2 atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And that was, the time that pretty much ended. Japan raised the white flag and decided that they were going to stop fighting and surrender. So that's where these 2 periods that we're going to be talking about, that's where this starts off. After World War II, and so we're now going to be going from after World War II until modern day Japan. So I'm going to go sit in the back and enjoy the presentations. I watched the video from last week, so it's a good lesson. Thank you. Good job. I got this. So after World War II, World War II Japan is what we're presenting on, and we're both going to present. Sorry, one thing. So the government in post-World War II Japan, beautiful slide, I know. So that's MacArthur on the left. Emperor hero. He was the last emperor of Japan. They went through 33 prime ministers since the end of World War II. There was corruption and gossip and slander going on. And there was health problems and issues arising. And then Prime Minister Kaitiki Tojo was executed because of the war crimes committed, but he didn't kill the emperor. emperor wasn't executed. General MacArthur felt like it was important to keep him alive to help the country transition to democracy. There was collaboration and collaborative symbols to unify the post-war time. America occupied Japan for roughly 6 years with the goal of demilitarizing Japan, bringing democracy to Japan, and decentralizing. In 1889, the Meiji Constitution, it was amended to help the country get back on their feet. And to add more to this, the emperor wasn't killed because he was a symbol to the Japanese people because they loved him. He was like a god to them. He was generationally in Japan. The prime minister was executed because they thought that the emperor was more of a symbol. He was the prime minister, was the person who caused a lot of this. He didn't have as much power, and the emperor was going to be able to keep Japan in control more. And that was the first time that Japan really occupied another country. The economy after World War II. These are some images. You can read just what they are right over here. Can everyone see me all right? So Keiretsu, or collective companies, tried to work together and support one another so that these businesses could have an income and influx of money. This concept was created by Japan after realizing that they needed to help these companies stay afloat and not shut down. The bank was involved in this, in supporting all of these companies. There are 6 main Keiretsu: Sumitomo, Fuo, Mitsu, Mitsubishi, Daiichi, Kangyo, and Sanwa. You guys all know the car company Toyota. It's pretty famous. Toyota is also protected by Keiretsu. That's how they sign it. So, thank you for that sign. And they're also supported by the Keiretsu under the system of Kaizen. Kaizen is a system that enforces strict continuous improvements, both positively and negatively. For example, think of the odd example of a sandwich. Normally you put peanut butter and jelly and all that jazz on the sandwich, but how to make it better, you could put banana in the sandwich, making it taste better. So that kind of concept of Kaizen is to make improvements to the system to make it better. For example, this was copied in other countries. General Electric copied the system of Kaizen to make things run more smoothly. This is just an illustration of a Keiretsu business group structure. So you can take a look and read it over. It shows the bank in the middle and real estate companies and insurance companies, then branching out to other companies like food, iron, and steel and such. Shiwart cycle. The USA War Department developed a program to help Japan revive their industry and bring it back to what it was. And the concept was a search for anything that needed improvement. And that was related to the Kaizen system. When we show some images, it might be a little bit more clear. So this pie chart is how they would start it. They would plan, they would come up with actions and things to do, and they would check what was going on, and then they would actually act upon it. So to summarize this, was they would bring a proposal to planning, check that it was everything that they could do was involved, and there was an agreement on it. They would then go ahead and do it, and then after seeing how well it went, they would re-up and check on it to see if the improvements were made, and then they would act in by putting in what needed to be put in to make the system better. So it was a four-way part. I'll do this part. So the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, MITI. Remember I talked about the 6 keiretsu? They were controlled by one big bank, and in return for that, they were able to be controlled by the MITI. They were in control of the 6 keiretsu. This had the most influence on Japan's economy, MITI, and they gave all of the direct orders to the keiretsu system. They controlled the prices of imports and exports. The Izanagi boom was between 1965 and 1970. The Vietnam War actually helped to boost their economy. And the GDP grew yearly at an annual rate of 11 to 13%. At the end of 1970, the GDP was at 70.4% higher than the GDP was in 1960. There was increases in production and indiscriminate in exportation. And Japan at this time actually surpassed the United States. Another boom that happened was the Heisei boom. And that was towards the end of the 1980s. And that helped to increase economy by producing and exporting cars and electronic devices was the cause of the boom. Like cell phones, computers, lots of foreign cars that we use now. And in the early 90s, everyone was wealthy, lower class, was wealthy. The lower class almost disappeared. Because everybody had enough money to be considered wealthy. However, it did plummet though. So that's another story for another day. So the culture of Japan after World War II is what we're going to do now. There's an image, a hula hooper. So imagine Japan being like a beehive. Think about it. It's a big beehive with a queen bee at the top, and then you have all the worker bees working together, supporting one another, and working towards the goal of the queen. Japan's people wanted to develop an equal, harmonious society. And during World War II, the Prime Minister and the Army both attempted to take over countries without the Emperor's permission, which was not cool to do.
And that led to disaster. The reason for that disaster was because they were trying to maintain this collective culture so that they would stop possible revolts from happening again. Some more imagery of the collective culture of Japan. Everybody has the Japanese flag out. I know this part's a lot of information. The culture during America's occupation. American soldiers were at that time told to be respectful to the Japanese, like taking off their shoes when entering homes and helping malnourished children. Japanese officials, they set up brothels and places of comfort to prevent American soldiers from going up to Japanese women and trying to make advances on them. Women would cut their hair really short in attempts to pass as men. And sometimes they would even carry pills filled with cyanide for suicide purposes if they were to be raped. American soldiers were not allowed to interact with the people of Japan and had weapons on them in case they were attacked in public. In the end, the orders were taken back since the Japanese people and the soldiers got along very well.
Deaf people in Japan after World War II. So all of these relate to deaf people in Japan. There's a lot of information. Are you ready? Okay, so the generation is called Dankei no Segai. And that's another name for the baby boomer generation. You know, like the Americans have baby boomers, so this is kind of similar to that. Dankai means mass or hub of birth. And, you know, it's explaining their collective culture. And deaf, so deaf, Dankai no Segai, they all have the same mentality, but they really struggled because of prejudices and discrimination that they experienced from the rest of society. The rest of society did not think that they were competent or able to do things. There were the Ryusai Kenbo and Kyoku Mama, mother, who really supported their children to try to get into school. The Japanese Federation of the Deaf was founded in 1947 after the Japanese Association of the Deaf shut down. The era of pleading was when, you know, the people who were involved in the Japanese Federation for the Deaf had to go to the government to plead for resources because they had been dead. And that changed after the youth section of the JFD started a movement called UNDO, which is Social Inclusion Movement. And they finally became officially recognized as a social welfare organization in 1950. The Bell Center was built by the JFD, and they really, you know, needed to have a lot of money to do these things, and it took a lot of work to build the center, but it wasn't successful because it cost too much money, and the Amakudari, you know, the bureaucrats and, you know, the government workers, they took control of the building, but they didn't really understand deaf culture. They didn't understand, you know, what to do or how to do their job properly. They were really only in it for a profit, and they weren't earning money. So there were two deaf men, Sato Yoshikazu and Kido Takashi. And how do you say accused like this? So they were accused of murder. Three hearing men were discriminating against them in the restaurant. So what happened was they ended up getting into a fight because they tried to kick the deaf men out of the restaurant. So the owner of the restaurant, during that fight, he hit his head by accident and he died. Matsumoto Masayuki was their lawyer, and he was able to reduce their sentence during the appeal. The one thing I wanted to add, Matsumoto Masayuki was the first deaf lawyer in Japan, and that's why he was very involved with this court case. And both of the people who were accused of murder, what ended up happening is the police were trying to talk with them, but because they didn't understand and they didn't know how to read or write, they were trying to sign, but the police are hearing and they don't know sign language. So they said, well, I guess they're guilty, and they just went ahead with it, put them in jail, and then the lawyer went in to try to support them and tried to explain that they can understand if they're smart, they're not stupid, but you have to use sign language. And so the police still thought that they were dumb, and therefore, during the appeal they reduced their sentencing. But again, the culture at that time had strong discrimination against deaf people. They thought that they were all dumb. Sutomai. So sutomai is also streptomycin. That's a word for the medication. It's an antibiotic. It was developed in 1943. It was very effective against several different diseases, like pneumonia, all of these medical terms you see here. Pneumonia, tuberculosis, spinal meningitis, and typhoid fever. It was a really fantastic drug and it worked very well, but the problem is that it caused many people to go deaf because of it. So this is what it looks like. So in 1964, there was a huge epidemic of rubella. It was most likely brought over to Japan by the American military. There were about 500 children born between 1964 to 1965. And out of those 500 children, about 300 of them were born with some sort of disability, whether it was being deaf or hard of hearing, etc. So a special school called the Kitashiro School for the Deaf was created, but it shut down in 1983. The education system for deaf people in Japan. Education was required by the government and by General MacArthur in 1948 on April 1st. Oralism, and everybody knows what that means, right? So oralism is like, hearing people look down on deaf people and try to force them to talk, force them to try and hear. So oralism was very strong after World War II in Japan. Students were not allowed to sign at all. It was against the mandatory requirement to learn how to speak and write in Japanese. The Kyoto School for the Deaf was founded in 1878. And another school for the deaf, Kitashiro School for the Deaf, was opened from 1977 to 1983. And so obviously that school supported deaf people, but oralism was still dominant in the schools. And they had basically the same curriculum and the same education as their hearing counterparts, but it was more difficult for deaf people because obviously they had a special need aside from the hearing school. So they needed to sign. They, would not benefit from oralism. Deaf protests. Matsumoto Masayaki was the first deaf lawyer. They didn't really have any interpreters for any legal proceedings or court trials. And there was also the Kyoto School for the Deaf protest in 1965. And the Furukamin anti-discrimination movement, people of the village, and the Zenga Kuren, which is a national student organization. And this is our work cited. Can you go back just a little bit? So I just wanted to get into this a little bit more in depth. The Kyoto School for the Deaf protests, that was happening because a lot of the students were falling behind and were not able to catch up. So by middle school and high school, they weren't really able to keep up with their education, especially if they had become, the students who were late deafened already had a lot of spoken and written skills, but people who were born deaf or went deaf at a young age were really far behind. And so they had these protests because they wanted to be able to use sign language in addition to oralism. And so what happened was the teachers worked on a rotation system. So the teachers would rotate, and you would have like one teacher in school, and you would learn sign language and be supported. But then you would rotate to another school with another teacher, and that teacher wouldn't know sign at all. So then you were stuck with a new teacher that didn't know any sign language, and it made it very difficult to try and catch up. So the people of the village, this was right here, is the Furukamin. There were many people who tried to help with the protests and provide resources for interpreters and anti-discrimination information. And then the last one really was just an organization that tried to get more support. A lawyer was involved with the last organization, with the Zenga Kuren. And he tried to improve the system for them. Any questions?
I'm curious. What was the relationship with the deaf community at this time? How were these connected to the deaf community?
Can you clarify your question?
So historically, I know how did these relate to the current deaf community and influence the current deaf community there?
Really, this was able to improve deaf culture in that community. It helped to reduce oralism and allow more people to use sign language and be part of the culture, so it was really important. And also, it gave kids the opportunity to, a lot of kids started young with oralism and then later were able to learn sign language. So it really improved the education system a lot. Any other questions?
Oh, I'm there.
Okay, so what was your question? Can you say it again?
Yeah, I know that these are all related, but I wanted to know how it influenced our deaf communities.
The American deaf community?
Or the world, international deaf community, I guess.
Okay, I'll move back a little bit. Yeah. 1978, Kyoto School for the Deaf opened. And then in 1980, the Milan Conference focused on oralism. So after that, they had a lot of oralism, but they also did teach some signs.
Is it like SimCom?
I mean, they were able to, have sign these words, but in 1880, America and Europe banned sign language, but it hadn't influenced Japan yet until 1925 or so. And then when that influence came to Japan, they also outlawed sign language. Prior to that, after that, so during World War II, after, sign language is still not allowed. So 1925 to 1968, sign language was not allowed to be used. Then they basically, when they set up the new deaf school, they copied how it was done in America. So kind of very basic signing was permitted, but really, the mode of communication that they preferred was, spoken language. So there was a bit of a mix, but during that time, oralism, there were many, each man had many students, there was, one school might have 200 or 300 students. Now, they have like maybe 30, 40, the classes have really gotten much smaller. So this school was set up in, So 1947, that's when, they really were enforcing oralism. And then
They tried to set up a Federation for the Deaf, and then in 1947, keep going. They expanded and celebrated and were able to move on from where they were to, but for the point being is that it was banned for a long time until the Japanese Federation for the Deaf and the next schools were set up. Thank you very much. So a couple things I just wanted to say. Next week, we're gonna have a presentation from someone from Japan via Skype. The Cisco room will be in right over here. I'll send an email to remind you about that. But we're actually gonna have a presentation from Utaka Osaki, who signed, that's how you sign it, or sign in. Osuki. He's a doctor who was raised in Japan. He's an educator. He's skilled in ASL. He went and had a deaf education. He graduated his PhD from the University of Rochester, actually, so he knows ASL very well. And on Skype, he will explain about the education system in Japan for deaf children. And we're going to do that next week. So that'll tie in with this, and it'll help give you a better overall picture about the education that deaf people have in Japan. So from his comments, his presentation, and then next week's Skype presentation will all help you get a better understanding. On March 29th, we're going to have a presentation related to the deaf community in Japan. There'll be one deaf woman named Kyoko. She's skilled in ASL as well. She studied at the University of California. So she was born and raised in Japan, and she'll do a presentation with us. And Naomi, who's hearing but signs ASL as well, who lives in Rochester. She's been here for a year and a half living in Rochester, so I invited the three of them to come and do perspective presentations. And then on April 13th, we're going to Skype in again with your video pen pals. So you're actually gonna get to see them, and we'll use that Cisco room again to do that too. I have it reserved for next week's presentation and for April 13th. So I'll send a reminder email to all of you guys to make sure you remember to go there. And then related to the rest of tonight's presentation. The amazing story about Japan is just so exhilarating that after World War II, Tokyo and a lot of cities in Japan, like Nagasaki, Hiroshima, were just destroyed after World War II. So they had to start fresh from scratch all over again. But with that collective culture, they were able to go about it, make decisions, manufacture and use the industry that they had to eliminate the outside support that they needed prior. They didn't need it anymore. They were able to self-sustain and they could depend on themselves. Because MacArthur at that time in the U.S., you saw him in that first picture, General MacArthur kind of helped for a couple years to develop a constitution and set up Japan's government, essentially, during that time. They did have a constitution before, but it became stronger after World War II with General MacArthur's help and all of that. And then after that, the U.S. was able to leave and leave them to fend for themselves. And the only thing that was banned, really, was that Japanese people were not allowed to have their own military. There was an established military, but they weren't able to send their military off to compete in war. That was called Article 9 of their constitution. It said that sending troops to war was bad. After World War II, they were done sending troops to war, but they were allowed to have an internal army for safety purposes. So that was really the main change to their constitution for the country. But ironically, recently, Obama, he encouraged Japan to build up their military for the purpose of Korea. So that America, if they had to continue to send more army people over to Japan to protect Japan from Korea, Obama encouraged them to try and be more of a peaceful country while also building up their military. And then Japan became really the second highest economic power in the world until what the next group will then explain, you'll see. So does anybody know who's second in charge now, power-wise, in the world? America is first, with China then being second. They shot up to the second place, whereas then Japan dropped down during that time period.
I believe that.
Okay. I don't want to steal any information or steal the show from our next presenters about modern day Japan. Ready? Okay. Hello, everybody. So our topic is modern day Japan, and I'm Victoria Kinev, and I'm Abraham Glazer. So the modern period in Japan is called the Heisei period, and that's been in place since 1989. In 1989, Emperor Hiroshito, who the previous group talked about, in 89 he passed away, and his son Akihito became and is the current Emperor of Japan. The most impactful event during this period is that the actual economy plummeted and crashed, which caused a lot of things to change culturally and caused a lot of change in people's lifestyles, and deaf culture as well was impacted. I actually found this online that Akihito announced that he'll be stepping down from his position on April 30th of next year, 2019. So that will be the end of the Heisei period. So that's just something to keep in mind. So I'm going to summarize some of the big events that took place during this period. The previous group just kind of talked about the economy developing during that time, which was referred to as the bubble economy, which I'll go into a little bit more. And then that bubble economy did collapse between 91 and 92. There was a few natural disasters that happened. In 95, there was a large earthquake, and in 2004, there was another earthquake, which was then followed by a tsunami in 2011. There was about 16,000 people who passed away, and this is a graphic from it. And still to this day, in 2018, they're trying to recover from that 2011 tsunami because they're not fully recovered, especially the northeast region of Japan. Since 1991, they refer to it as the lost decade or the lost 20 years, and that's because the economy crashed so bad and they still haven't been able to recover from it. So we talked about how development was on the rise and there was a lot of inflation happening at that time, because a lot of people did have money, whereas other people were really poor. Or there was not a lot of people who had money, a lot of people were poor. Or a lot of people did have money, not a lot of people were poor, I apologize. So the banks loaned out more money than before, and that led to a decrease in inflation, and then it went back up, and then that led to more banks loaning out money to people. But those people weren't able to borrow it as much or pay it back with the interest that was put upon it, because everybody at the time was borrowing money and then had the inability to pay it back and owed a lot of debt to the bank, which then wasn't being accrued, which then caused banks to fall apart and be closed down, which just led to a more and more plummet of the economy at the time. And the government did paying out a lot of the money to the banks, but still it didn't really run as efficiently as possible. It wasn't able to develop, it just stayed where it was. It wasn't able to fully recover due to that. And to make things worse, Japan was still trying to recover from natural disasters and economic disasters like the earthquake and tsunami. So while they were trying to recover economically, they were also trying to recover geographically due to natural disasters. Because the economy was where it was, people's earnings and wages were lower than they had been prior, so people were working more hours to earn less money. And that's a serious issue for people who are working all day and all night, 24/7, not taking any vacations, rarely if ever taking a break. They just worked themselves as much as they could to support themselves and to be able to support Japan as a country to help them get back on their feet. And this led to a lower birth rate because people were working all day, every day. They didn't have the ability to take care of children, so they were having less children and having smaller families. And if someone did have a kid at that time, it wasn't always the best situation because the parents were out working all day. There wasn't much adequate care being given to the child, which will be explained more in slides to come. And like I said before, Japan was just stagnant and not thriving because they were unable to just take that step up. So hikikomori is a term that meant most people were in isolation from the outside world. They couldn't deal with what was going on. Parents had to take care of kids, and they just didn't do much in the outside community. They stayed in as much. And typically 15-year-olds to right about 40 years old were just more shut in and more kept to themselves. There's a lot of different reasons why the hikikomori happened, but the main reason is that most families typically had one kid who was usually one son, and they took on the role model position because the father was working all day, every day, and they were looking up to their father as a role model. They felt as if they couldn't build their own identity or couldn't really figure out who they were in relation to their parents because their parents were working so much, which led to a ton of other things, but really manifested in isolation for those people. Manga and anime. Manga and anime that started before the modern day Japan, obviously, but for right now, it was an economic boom. People were working harder than ever before. People had less money even though they were working harder, or some people didn't even have a job, so they would be very stressed, and when they would go home, they used anime and manga as a way to de-stress and relax. A lot of reasons into why it's popular, but that's the main one, is the relaxation technique. Kids loved it because it's a cartoon and it's geared towards children. And manga artists were adding a lot of comics and a lot of adult content as well to the manga and anime. There were some people who were very immersed in manga and anime, called otaku, which is like a nerd or someone who loves to read manga and is completely immersed by it. They dress like the characters from the books and they attempt to be like them. Most Americans know Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z as main anime, but Dragon Ball Z was released during the Showa period, and it was so popular at that time. When they ended in 1995, people felt like they weren't going to read manga anymore because they were so into Dragon Ball. So they wanted more, but that's the main reason why it kind of went down at that time. The character on the end is from Dragon Ball. One Piece is the middle one, and then Pokemon.
So obviously, most of us know for pop culture, video games, and Nintendo. So that company started a long time ago, but during this period, they invented the Game Boy, the Wii. They came out with Mario and Zelda, Donkey Kong, all of the more popular games, and then that spread to America and really all over the world. And Nintendo really was, Nintendo had invented Donkey Kong. That was the first game. And it included Mario as a character. So really they invented Donkey Kong before they invented Mario. Donkey Kong was very popular. And Mario was just kind of in there as a joke, but then, he was just supposed to be able to jump. And be like a stuntman, but then he was really popular, so then they created a game off of him too. But this was their first game. And then of course you see here Mario Through the Ages, and I think this is, Donkey Kong was invented in they came out with Donkey Kong in probably the 1970s, because then Mario came out in the 1980s. Deaf history, as they explained, was very heavily oral, but now it's much more open. I think about 95% of deaf people in Japan know JSL, so that's good because almost all of them know JSL. They have some prefectures, some regions that have, at least one deaf school. So there's a lot of education for deaf children. There's about 350,000 deaf people in Japan. Some deaf role models are the two people you see here. Ayumi Hamasaki, and she's known, she's a singer and an actress, and they call her the Empress of J-pop. And another person whose name is Yakami Aoi, who is a deaf wrestler. And so, both of these women have really inspired other deaf people, and while we were doing research, we found that one guy, they called him Beethoven. So, he was deaf, and until recently they found out, nope, it was a lie. He was not deaf. He'd been a fraud the whole time. So I read a lot about that, and obviously that was not good. But that was one. He used to be a role model, but obviously now because he was a fraud, he's no longer a role model. And hearing people in Japan tend to be very, they keep their opinions to themselves. They're not very blunt. They avoid eye contact. But the deaf people in Japan are very expressive. They make a lot of eye contact. And, for example, here in America, deaf people and hearing people, both gesture sometimes, and they're very open and honest about their opinions. But if somebody is very, expressive, then they're easily identified as being a deaf person in Japan. Not just because, of the medication that had caused deafness, but there was also, Japanese Sign Language was spreading and deaf identity became more acceptable. So, you're like, oh, okay, you're deaf, not, oh, what am I supposed to, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing with your hands? Like, more people became aware of deafness and JSL. And in each prefecture, and the different islands, they all have at least one school for the deaf, because there are so many deaf people. They don't, if somebody lives like really all the way north in Japan, they don't have to go travel so far to go to a deaf school. They have them all over the place, which is really great. And here are our differences. Any questions?
I have a question actually. It seems like there's a lot of deaf people in Japan, but do a lot of deaf people marry other deaf people and keep the deaf culture going?
I have no idea. I haven't researched that part.
Yeah, I was just curious.
I would say yes, because it's more acceptable and, they're no longer being oppressed. So I would assume yes, but I don't know if they have to marry another deaf person, but maybe Ohio has more information about that.
I was just curious if deaf people tend to marry other deaf people in Japan like they do here in America, or they set up to marry. I think it's similar to America, in that way, yes. With Dragon Ball Z, it did become popular, and other animes and mangas became very popular. Like Astro Boy, for example.
Yeah, that was, Astro Boy became popular after World War II, and that was really because, they had dropped the atomic bomb, and so they kind of applied that to Astro Boy, and he was a bomb, right? Yeah. So it didn't really continue yet. It started, during this period, or it had started before this period, and it was very popular before the company could get researched.
Now, after Dragon Ball Z, do you know any more popular mangas that are popular right now?
For me, I read a lot of manga. Yeah, she's an otaku. I mean, I don't know about, so hardcore, but yeah, I do read some of them, like Naruto, but that recently finished. Well, really 3 years ago, but I was very excited about that. So, it's a good one. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, I've read them all. There's One Piece, that finished too, there's Bleach. There's a whole bunch of them. Some of them are also a lot older, but there's so many. But I would say right now, for acting books, that's usually what it is. Sailor Moon was another old one that was like the 90s, early 90s.
And they're making it again, new and improved too. Oh, they already did make it again, they rebooted it.
Sailor Moon? Oh, cool.
But season 1 and season 2, season 3 is good. And then I haven't seen the 4th season, what happens, but the first 2 seasons were meh. Sticky things were happening in the first 2 seasons and whatnot, so meh.
Yeah, I'm sure most people prefer the original.
Yeah, just my opinion.
Any other questions?
Thank you guys. So a couple of things related to modern day Japan. With modern day Japan, a few things to mention. When you go to Japan, in Tokyo specifically, there's a lot of opportunities to see examples of popular culture around Tokyo. You'll see a lot of different cafes and eating establishments that have manga. They have cat cafes. They have owl cafes. That's one example of pop culture, modern pop culture. The hikikomori and the otaku. You'll see examples of those in Tokyo pretty often. They have some cafes where people can rent out a chair or a specific seat to play video games and just stay there all day and all night and just play and play and play and play. The hikikomori is the technology. That is really something that people are enamored with. And the economy as well. There's not an overabundance of jobs like there once was. So men and women will stay home sometimes and just kind of work off of their parents. And sometimes they call them leeches because they're just leeching off of their parents because the job market isn't abundant as it once was and they don't have a place to go. You'll see that pretty often. It's pretty fascinating to see because Japanese culture traditionally has been very traditional. And people do a lot of bowing, they wear kimonos, they have tea ceremonies, X, Y, and Z, traditional things. But then on the other end of the new generation in Japan, they're a lot more young and they try to find their own identities apart from traditional Japan. During the 80s, that developed the identity a lot of people identifying how. In the 80s, do you remember? What were most people's identity at that time? Japanese. What did they do during the 1980s to promote the economy? People work all day, every day, so their identity was related to their job, and their identity was related to labor and hard work. Japan was known for their hard work, and that was the identity that they took on. And when the economy crashed, some people lost their employment and they lost their identity. So that kind of changed their spending habits and their needs to escape reality. So it led to that situation with this now change over the years of identities. And Japan's economy is pretty good at the moment. It's not great, but it's definitely good. It's not prosperous in the way it once was. People still work, have jobs. The government, however, is struggling with right now is low birth rate. Same as in Italy. Has anybody been to Italy here before? There's not a lot of births happening, and it's like almost a cry out now for people to have children. And Japan is the same thing. Why would it be bad if there's a low birth rate?
It's bad because, then the population is gonna decrease, and how will you, keep tradition alive or have future generations?
Yeah, there's no labor, no bodies to cover the job. So Japan is struggling with that at the moment. And one other big problem that they are having is the policies related to immigration. Little resistance, they're not welcoming people from everywhere to come and live in Japan. But I think now they're starting to reflect on that and think about maybe bringing in more immigrants from other countries to start having the discussion and the debate as to what that would look like. But it's kind of hard because they're used to their Japanese native culture and inviting other people to come live. What if Chinese people come? And do you guys remember who has the highest population of foreigners? Korea. Some Koreans need jobs, so they're willing to go over to Japan. So, and that's becoming a new future problem for the next 20 years to come.
So people who, leave North Korea, go to Japan, they try to get jobs.
Yeah, because of the look. You mentioned Hirohito, the emperor. He's the current, it's the son of him, the current emperor now. When I saw him, I was able to wave and see him. January 3rd, when I was there, they tend to come out to their banister and say hello to the crowd and whatnot, wave the flag and such. I was there and able to see him when he did that. But he is ready to step down from his position. He's been in it for a long time. He's quite old. He started in 1989. He's 89 years old. And they told him not yet, but he couldn't do it yet. And the government realized that Abe Shinto, the prime minister, made the announcement and the declaration saying that in April 9th of 2019 will be the end of the Sai period. And they made that formal announcement. So they didn't say he's stepping down, They're gonna make it a slower transition so that the next person can take over smoothly and we can start the new period. The Japanese way to do it, of harmony, Not just saying he's done, he's out of his position, and have him sulk on the way out, and have it be a terrible travesty and all that. That's not how they want it to go. They're giving him the chance to bow out gracefully and finish his 30-year term and move on from there. So, and then they'll be able to turn it over and it'll be a nice, peaceful transition. And that's the importance of the emperor situation in Japan. Because in World War II at that time, they didn't kill the emperor. They let him be a symbol to win people over and keep the heart of Japan. And they kept the emperor in his position to preserve Japanese culture going forward. The emperor really, in all honesty, has not all that much power. It's like the government runs on their own without the emperor.
So do they decide who the next emperor is?
I think they have seven children. I'm trying to find a JSL. 7 children? I think they have 7 children, yeah.
2 girls.
So maybe 3. I know, I'm trying to picture all of them right now. 3 and 3, I think. One of his sons will take over next, yes. So, was the otaku offensive to Japanese people, or? They don't say it like, it's not like a shooing. They'll say shoru. They'll say shoru instead of otaku, but I'm just kidding. Other questions?
Yeah, I wanted to know, about Japanese society in general. What's their opinion on,
Well, ask our Japanese expert what he thinks. The hikobo?
Good morning.
Oh, the isolation and people being by themselves. A sensitive topic, yes.
So this is the sign for hikomory. And, at the top level, they're there all day. They stay in bed. they've got a TV that's like literally above their bed, and so they just don't even get out. So that's like, you can't even get their attention. So then as you kind of come down the pyramid here, you know, some are out, you know, they don't have a job, but, you know, they'll play some games or they'll do some things outside. But they're kind of okay, yeah, so otaku, and you know, it's their kind of backwards.
So how do you feel about Americans taking those words and not knowing what they mean and using them? Probably not polite, to just direct, to like say, oh, are you otaku to someone? Yeah, right.
Yeah, like, well, you know, be like, oh, what are you, you know, what do you like, or what are you really interested in?
The word otaku, not a lot of people know it. I just don't want it to seem offensive.
As an insult. Is it insulting? Otaku, I mean, I definitely wouldn't ask. So I wouldn't go up to somebody, you know, I wouldn't go up to somebody and say, are you dumb? And they'd be like, what? It's kind of that same concept. So, oh, you lost your job? You know, it's kind of that same concept. So, again, with otaku,
It's like, are you saying you want SSI to someone? You know how it makes you feel? Yeah, same feeling, kind of.
yeah, so, Ikomo means like, you haven't gotten a job yet, so for those people, you know, it would be kind of like that, like, oh, or you weren't able to go to university, or, you know, maybe, they had some other struggle, you know, at home, or maybe they were homeless.
I've heard like one situation that happened in Japan. There was one guy, he considered himself otaku, murdered several girls, and then after those killings happened, Japanese society kind of looked at the word as otaku as bad because of that situation, right?
And honestly, I don't know. But there, you know, there's many reasons why it's a bad word. The list goes on and on. But you know, I definitely wouldn't say either one of them. It's just more of something that, you know, we can kind of tell.
Cool. Like you said, hikomoi sign. Is there?
So hikomoi. So, you know, like unemployed or no, you know, not having a job. So they borrow from the English. They mean like, you know, like leech. It's kind of complicated to explain, but usually it means somebody, you know, who's staying in their home. They don't really go outside. Whereas eat means, you know, they don't have a job, but they still, you know, will go outside and do things outside or whatever. But, you know, maybe they're looking for work, so that would be when you use that word. But Hikomo doesn't even care about finding a job, they just stay at home and, you know, play games or whatever else.
The reason I asked is because there's a book that I saw, it was hikomoi, and it was all, I don't want people to, it wasn't about people who are looking for a job, where I was like, oh, should it have been called eat, or should it have been called hikomoi? So, but that makes sense.
Yeah, eat's more general, where, you know, like otaku doesn't really fall under that. It has, you know, because otaku, they can have jobs. So, okay, so now I'm kind of changing my mind. So, okay, but before, you know, it could apply to a student as well. So, you know, like, oh, if they didn't want to go to school, it'd be like, oh, okay, I'm in the morning.
I'm not sure if one of our presenters will talk about it, but Japanese people put a heavy value on the education system. So a lot of parents in Japan will send their kids to primary public school, and they will also have money for if they don't have a job, they will then send them kids to private tutoring all evening, like a cram school. So you know, like when you study a lot right before a test, they try to figure out if graduating high school or graduating from college is more important. In Japan, it's high school. They really put a high emphasis on graduating high school, and then you can go to get a good job from there, or you can get into a good college. So they put their emphasis on high school. Well, because of the economy and the impacts that the economy had, all parents were not able to afford schooling for their children. So a lot of those kids didn't go to these cram schools, and they kind of end up getting good jobs or getting into good colleges, and then they end up becoming hikikomori or eat because of that. So it's cyclic in that way. Because of the crash of the economy and those blunders happening again and again, people fall into these cycles where they don't have enough money to send their kids to cram schools, and then when those kids are done with the cram school, they end up studying even more on their own. So they have to then get up in the morning, go to school, then go to cram school, then go and study on their own again.
So they have exams and everything for college, and because for high school it's very stressful because the students are studying so much. I mean, if they get out there, they're not doing well in school, are they going to have less self-esteem? And like the best private schools to go to, right?
Yeah, that's why some people will come here to America to get more education. Japan, the economy is still pretty good there. They have good products like cars, their technology, the televisions that come out of Japan are still some of the best. So their economy is thriving in that way. But figuring out how to solve some of the issues that are there now, because if you think about it, the boom only happened, it happened and then trailed from there. So, is there anything you want to add? It helps you to get a deeper understanding of the culture. Do they have deaf cram schools? Like when you go to school all day, and then when you're done, you go to another school for even more studying. Do they have that for deaf people? So.
Usually they're mainstream.
Yeah, the mainstream deaf student, they then go to a hiku or a cram school. Oh, Juku. That's their word for cram school. That's good to know, right? So next week we'll meet at the Cisco lab. If you go to the corner of this hallway and turn right down at the end, but I'll remind you via email. And someone will be there waiting to get you guys into the room. So I'll send out an email reminder though.
Thank you for reviewing the response paper. The instructions are on my courses right now, so you'll see it. It says response paper assignment. Just click that, and it'll come up for you. The response questions are pretty simple, so it's just basically what you've learned so far in this class, what you are still curious about for the rest of class, and so you'll send a response. It's a minimum of 500 words. So it can be more than 500, but a minimum of 500 is required. And then please make sure it's double spaced. I can't read single spaced papers. okay?
It's too thick.
And I'll see you next Thursday at 5. Or 3, yeah, thank you. The papers will be next Thursday at 5 in the Dropbox. And that's all, folks.
Is that all?
Sayonara.